This will be a long war. It is our second war of independence. We will fight and we will not surrender. We will not withdraw. Overground and underground. It will be a victory of the good over evil.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu speaking just last hour. It's the first time he has taken media questions since October 7th and the attacks by Hamas. Netanyahu vowed to defeat Hamas and claim victory for Israel, which has now expanded its ground operation into Gaza, sending in tanks and infantry backed by massive strikes coming from the air and the sea, as the war against Hamas now enters into its fourth week. Hello, everyone. I'm Natasha Fatah, and you're watching CBC News Network. Journalist Iris Mackler was watching Benjamin Netanyahu's press conference, and she has more on what he told the nation.
It was astounding, first of all, because Benjamin Netanyahu, as you said, answered questions. He hasn't answered questions since the attack on October the 7th. And really, he hasn't answered questions from Israeli journalists for the previous year. You remember what a tumultuous year that was with all these protests and that judicial overhaul, never a word. So the fact that he answered questions, or at least stood up to answer questions, I just saw someone on Twitter saying, just because I've agreed that you can ask questions doesn't mean I have to answer them, because the thing that people really want an answer from him is his responsibility. Because what struck me was three men dressed in black coming out and addressing the public in strident tones and telling them they're going to win, I think still scrambling to make up for the shock of October the 7th, for the death of 1,400 Israelis, for the failure of intelligence and the failure to protect them. So all of that, I think this is still coming back from that, the shock of that and the reality of that. So that, I think, is part of why everybody wants an answer to the question, do you take responsibility, Mr. Prime Minister, which is what was asked, but there was no direct answer. And when very specific questions were put to him, what about this piece of intelligence? You didn't respond to that. Why didn't you take this step? There was still no answer. He's a very good talker, and he was very good at putting the journalists off. But the theme of we are unified despite all our differences, and we will win in this war, which we intend to do, which we must do, I suppose, to make up for that, the terrible loss of October the 7th. And the fact that now the war is in a second phase, and most importantly, I think, bringing the return of the hostages up as a war aim equal to the destruction of Hamas's military and political capabilities. That's something that we didn't see in the first 2 weeks of the war, and perhaps that's something that is now more and more to the fore with the importance that the Israeli public is giving it.
Iris, I want to talk to you about the hostages and what Netanyahu had to say about all that. But first, I actually want to double down a little bit on those reporters. As you said, he pushed back against the journalists, but the journalists didn't stop. They really came at him quite substantially. And his response, as you mentioned, to the issue of an intelligence failure was that there was absolutely going to be an investigation. There's absolutely mistakes that were made. Everyone will have to answer for it, myself included, he said, but after the war. And then again, repeatedly, we heard, well, this is going to be a long war. So the journalists also pushed him on, were you too preoccupied with the West Bank? Were you too preoccupied with the judicial review, with the protests happening at home? They even brought up Shalit, the prisoner exchange for that. And one of the reporters accused him of allowing murderers to go free. And it just was fascinating how much they were pushing on that. So does that give us an indication of how much pressure Netanyahu is feeling at home?
I'll say two things. One is when you haven't spoken to the public for a year, then I think, and you finally front the journalists, then yes, I guess they do push back because it's an opportunity they haven't had. So that's one, just, you know, there's only so long a Prime Minister can avoid answering questions, and especially at a time like this. So I think that's why there was this intense pushback. It's not just the pressure that he's under. I think it's the pressure that he's going to be under. I have heard a number of pundits saying, yes, now we must fight this war, but nevertheless I call on Netanyahu to resign. Or saying, yes, now we must fight this war, as I heard someone say in the studio last night, but Benjamin Netanyahu is now a danger to Israel because he doesn't put the state first, he puts his own personal interests first. So that's just to give you a flavour of what's being said by people who are conceding that they may have to wait to ask the questions and to put those points of view to him. And I think what I have heard many people saying is that politically, he's a dead man walking. He will not survive a catastrophe in Israeli terms like this one, the death of 1,400 people and the failure to protect them, when he has always sold himself as Mr. Security to the Israeli public. So I think that he is under an enormous amount of pressure, but I don't know that anyone, any politician, not just Benjamin Netanyahu, that any politician could survive a crisis like this one, no matter what the outcome of this war.
Iris Mackler reporting from Jerusalem.